honor to welcome you to the Monadnock region, to Cheshire County, to the city of Keene, and the traditional lands of the Abenaki people. Last night at the screening of the documentary Join or Die, how many of you were there at the screening? Priya Parker, who wrote a book about the art of gathering, said in that screening that gathering is a radical act, because when you do that, you're creating power. And by gathering here and bringing our unique rural identities and experiences, we are proving in a palpable and visible way that small towns have extraordinary impact. So, just so you know what to expect this morning, hold on. There we go. Just so you know what to expect this morning, after my words of welcome, we will enjoy music, literature, and storytelling that will set the stage for the next 2 days together. In between, I'll be giving announcements and gratitude. Radically Rural is the national ecosystem building programming for the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship, which started 27 years ago and is based right here in Keene. We do what we do because we know that solutions exist to our most pressing problems, and no one needs to do this alone or recreate the wheel. We can shape and share ideas together. Our Radically Rural Summit founding partner is our local newspaper, the Keene Sentinel. Right now, I want to give a special shout out to them. This year, they celebrated their 225th anniversary. Happy birthday, Keene Sentinel. Here are some pictures. The most adorable part to me personally was a local celebrity softball game that they had. It was really so wholesome, heartwarming, and very rural. Local news is so essential to our social fabric and all aspects of thriving rural communities, so we're grateful that they continue to lead our journalism track and support other rural journalists to have the same staying power. Okay. How many of you have organized events before? Yeah, that's what I thought. I'm like, people who come to Radically Rural have organized events before. So I have good news for you. Today, your only job, unless you're a speaker or doing something else, is to be present, be curious, and above all, enjoy. We hope that over the years we've exemplified that joy, hope, and fun are all essential components to truly effective work. I'm also guessing that many of us in this room, really not used to doing this, okay. I'm guessing that many of us in this room are deep thinkers and systems level thinkers. I personally spend a lot of time reflecting on why I do what I do and how that connects with the big picture, how our world is designed to function and how I can contribute to it. I bet you do too. All of us understand why our particular piece of the puzzle is important, and we probably spend a lot of time explaining that to other people and advocating for our piece of that puzzle out in the world. We may even feel like our piece of the puzzle is the most important. Perhaps we say, for example, that education is at the root of everything. If education were strong everywhere, then everything would be different. Or we believe financial security and well-being is at the root of everything. Or healthy local news landscape, housing, childcare, infrastructure. Last night, mental health was brought up. Last week, I had a conversation with some of our local nonprofit leaders about food systems and how that's at the core of so much. So we all have our pieces. For me, my personal belief is that everything would be different if active, ongoing, deep, and meaningful relationship with land was restored. I think that ripples out to everything, including our ability to be in relationship with each other. The earth is a very good teacher. So what's your one thing? I'll give you a second to think about it. Now imagine, what if each of our one things is a thread? The beauty of a convening like Radically Rural that has such amazing diversity of sector, geography, identities, etc., is that we all bring our one things together. Last night I talked about how this particular combination of people at this point in time will never happen again, and it has never happened before. We have a unique opportunity, not only during these 2 days, but moving forward, to weave something that is truly spectacular. Literally, we will be doing something like that in one of our art sessions, which you might see evidence of tomorrow. Metaphorically, in order to do that, to really and truly and authentically do that, we have to be able to reach toward each other, to listen to each other, to believe each other's experiences, to trust. We have to move and bend and step back at times and then step forward at other times, all while keeping the end goal of the emerging picture in mind. And I think that picture and what we all hope to weave is where it can get complicated. And we may disagree with each other. Much grace is needed in this work, and it's not easy. I hope that these next 2 days will give you tools and inspiration to keep doing it anyway. All right then, announcements and gratitude to all of the folks that make Radically Rural possible are forthcoming, but for now, let me introduce you to our musician, Guy Davis. Guy, whoops, here we go. Oh, there we go. Guy is a 2-time back-to-back Grammy nominee for Best Traditional Blues, a musician, actor, author, and songwriter. His blues music is inspired by the Southern speech of his grandmother. He grew up hearing accounts of life in the rural South from his parents, and especially his grandparents, and they made their way into his own stories and songs. His storytelling is sometimes painful, deep, and real, often an earthy contrast to modern-day commercial music. His music is meant to create thought, underlined by gentle tones. His music and spoken word is used to comment on and address the frustrations of social injustice, touching on both historical events, like the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and common life struggles. His first exposure to the blues was at a summer camp in Vermont, run by Pete Seeger's brother, John Seeger, where he learned to play the 5-string banjo. He would go on to perform on occasion with Pete. I loved this comment I found from someone in attendance of one of his 2019 concerts. Here's what Don Wilcock with Nippertown News said. Nippertown's a cool word. At the end of his concert, Guy Davis stood up and explaining that Pete Seeger's greatest gift was not in his singing or his songwriting, but in his ability to turn an audience of strangers into close friends by getting them to sing along. And then he noted Guy's gift of doing the same thing. One time, we got a comment, as organizers, I know you're gonna understand this. One time, we got a comment from an attendee that they didn't know what music and poetry had to do with anything, and they were a waste of time. The comment that I just read embodies why we include it. Deep and meaningful connection with each other and the world around us doesn't just come from talking about it. We can't just use our minds to bend our will and force it. Sometimes we just have to be and listen together. We don't have to move through the arts to get to what's important. They are themselves important. Another thread in the tapestry. Let's give Guy a warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to do a song I learned when I was 8 years old at this summer camp. And not only did Pete Seeger and others write it, one of the authors I didn't know till I saw the sheet music, and that was Lead Belly. It's called Kisses Sweeter Than Wine. And you all can help me sing this. It goes like this. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Try that with me. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. When I was a young man and never been kissed, I got to thinking it over, what I had missed. I got me a girl, kissed her, and then, oh Lord, you know, I kissed her again. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Let's hear those voices. Come on, fill up the room. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. I asked her to marry and be my sweet wife. Said we'd be so happy all of our life. I begged and I pleaded like a natural man. Oh Lord, you know, she gave me her hand. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Don't be shy. Fill up this room. Come on now. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. We worked mighty hard, both me and my wife, working hand in hand to make a good life. Corn in the fields, wheat in the bins. I was, oh Lord, the father of twins. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Now you guys have voices better than that. Come on now. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Ooh, we got to. I'm gonna do. You deserve better tuning than. Our children numbered just about 4. They all had sweethearts knocking at the door. They all got married and they didn't hesitate. I was, oh Lord, the grandfather of 8. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Let those voices raise to the ceiling. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Well, now we are old and ready to go. We get to thinking what happened a long time ago. We had lots of kids, lots of trouble and pain. Oh Lord, you know we do it again. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. Let me hear you 2 more times. Oh, kisses sweeter than wine. 1 more. Oh, kisses. Thank you. Gosh, you make my job mighty fun, especially this early in the morning. There was a man named Reverend Robert Wilkins wrote a song called That's No Way to Get Along. And a big city music group heard that song. I think he recorded this thing back in 1928. A big city music group called the Rolling Stones heard it. So I guess in the early 1960s, they recorded Wilkins' song under the name Prodigal Son. Now, Reverend Wilkins, not wishing to be yet another black musician exploited for his music, re-recorded his own song under the name Prodigal Son. So when the Rolling Stones made money, Reverend Wilkins made money. And nobody ever knew what happened to that group, the Rolling Stones. They just drifted into obscurity. Well, I'm going home. Friends, sit down and tell my oh mama. Friend, I'm gonna sit down and tell my mom. Well, I'm going home. Sit down, tell my mom. Yes, I'm going home, friends, to sit down, tell my mom. Hey, that's no way for me to get along. These low-down women, mama, they treated your poor son wrong. They treated your poor son wrong. These low-down women treated your poor son wrong. Yes, the low-down women where they treated your poor son wrong. And that's no way for me to get along. They treated me like my poor heart was made from a rock of stone, was made from a rock of stone. Treated me like my poor heart made of a rock of stone. Treated me like my poor heart made from a rock of stone. Hey, that's no way for me to get along. Regarding low-down women, I look up to low-down women. Wasn't for low-down women, I wouldn't have a career singing the blues. You know that was enough, mama, to make your son wished he dead and gone. Made me wish I dead and gone. That's enough to make your poor son wish he dead and. That's enough to make your poor son wish he dead and gone. Hey, that's no way for me to get along. I stood out on the roadside. I cried alone, all by myself. I cried all by myself. Stood alone on the roadside. I cried all by myself. Stood alone on the roadside. I cried all by myself. Well, that's no way for me to get along. And I'm wanting some train to come and take me on away from here. Come on, take me away from here. Some train to come along, take me away from. Some train to come along, take me away from here. Hey, that's no way for me to get along. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. And Guy will be back. He'll be back, so don't worry. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And he will be back in just a little bit. So, all right. You're in for 10 minutes, or just shy of lively updates, announcements, and gratitude. So get these babies ready, because there's going to be a lot of clapping. In case you haven't been following along, this year through Radically Rural, we had virtual roundtables on topics like rural biotech, employee ownership, disaster news coverage. With your help also this year, we did our very first rural policy white paper called By Rural for Rural, and we distributed it to every federal senator and member of the House of Representatives. Shout out to Sharon, a Hannah Grimes employee, who sent out like 500 emails. This is a tradition we hope to continue year after year so we can continue to advocate for the needs of our communities. When I was on a meeting with one of the representatives' offices who got in touch with us after getting the white paper, they said, honestly, this is pretty utopian. You're like handing this all to us on a silver platter. I was like, yes, we are. Thank you for recognizing that. If you have policy ideas for us to include in this year's white paper, please see the QR code out front at registration. Also in the demystifying policy session that's happening, if you click on that session in the app, there is a link to the policy form there too. We also visited some rural communities doing wonderful work this year as a part of what we affectionately call Radically Rural on the Road. Our biggest trip was to Hood River, Oregon, and you can see some of the pictures here. You can read more about the trip and what we learned on our website blog, and I still have more to write and share, but I was a little busy after I got back. Hood River was also featured in the Business Journal magazine, the Radically Rural edition, which you should have a copy of. The writer actually traveled all the way here to be with us, so thanks to Noah for coming here to spend these days with us. And I loved that he was able to come because of a scholarship he got from an anonymous donor who wanted to help him get here, and I just feel like that represents what we do in rural communities, which is showing up for each other. Also, Alicia and Michelle are here, who met up with me while I was in Oregon. They are with the Ford Family Foundation, and hi, it was so much fun hanging out with you when I was there. So, should we visit your community this year? Thank you, that was not rhetorical. Make your case to us here, scan the QR code either out at registration or here on the screen, and tell us what you love about your town. All right, one of the things we love to do is engage youth early on, and therefore, every year we highlight students who are contributing to the programming, either in attendance or programmatic design. As you may have seen on your way in, this year the Franklin Pierce students are trying something new. They typically do that newspaper tab, if you've been here before. Now they're doing a live broadcast. They may even snag some of you for an interview. We also have a group of students from Springfield College, Recreation Industries and Therapeutic Recreation, who will have a lunchtime pop-up station in Railroad Square to help adults relearn the skill that many of us have forgotten, which is play, and learn how it can facilitate individual, interpersonal, and community bonding and bridging social capital. Both groups of students did a lot of work in a short amount of time since the semester started not too long ago, so let's say thank you to these two groups of students. I know we also have other students in attendance from Keene State, from elsewhere, and of course my favorite student, my daughter, Drew Kate, who will be helping over the next 2 days. So if you're a student of any age, please stand up. We want to recognize you. All students. There we go. Come on, Springfield College. There we go. This is the next generation of rural leaders, so thank you for being here. Radically Rural is only possible with an incredible groundswell of support, both locally and nationally. So we're gonna do a lot of thanking now, which is where the hands come in. I will begin with our track leaders, who have worked since the moment we left the last summit until now to bring you about 60 incredible thinkers and doers from all over the country to talk about the most important issues and solutions of our time. Track leaders, if you're here, please stand or give everyone a wave. We also want to thank all of our speakers who have given their time and talents to use for the greater good. I'm so looking forward to soaking in the energy and ideas generated during these sessions, and I hope you are too. So these are not speakers. I'm going to go back to that slide. If you're a speaker, please raise your hand or stand. Speaker for any of our sessions. There we go. Thank you for being here with us. Our deepest thanks to the Hannah Grimes Center staff, especially Lillian and Megan, for being amazing partners in organizing and executing this summit. Lillian, Megan, if you're here, you want to raise your hand? There you are. Megan, oh, there's Lillian back there. Thank you. Our entire planning team, several of whom are volunteers and have met weekly with us for years. The last couple of weeks, I've been told more than once, we don't need you for that. And that's a really good feeling. If you're a member of the planning team, please stand or raise your hand. They're probably busy. Thank you to our National Advisory Group, who met with us monthly to advise us on our programming. If you're a member of the advisory group, please stand or raise your hand. There we go, there we go. Thank you to all of our volunteers, who are all very incredible and thoughtful folks. Thank you for being a part of this. If you're a volunteer, please stand or raise your hand. Told you it was going to be a lot of clapping. Thank you to our local businesses, many of whom have made specific preparations for your arrival, including offering 15 and 15, which is lunches for $15 in 15 minutes or less. And those stations of where you can get the 15 and 15 are going to pop up in your app as an announcement at lunchtime. There's businesses participating in our solutions scavenger hunt, providing space for community tables, and more. So thank you to all of our vendors and venues and local businesses who have worked with us so gracefully and artfully. And of course, as you all know very well, none of this could happen without funding. If you are affiliated with any of our sponsors, no matter what level, please stand or raise your hand. I'll begin by thanking our radical level sponsors or grant funders: Northern Borders Regional Commission, New Hampshire Humanities, New Hampshire Business Finance Authority, the Colonial Performing Arts Center, which is where we are now, this beautiful theater, C&S Wholesale Grocers, and Cheshire County. You'll hear from some other folks in other sessions, but for now, I'll bring Chris Coates, the county administrator, up for a few words. We can all awkwardly wait.
First, want to start off by saying it was magical this morning listening to Mr. Davis. I think another round of applause is due. And I'm guessing at some point that Juliana will get her due and thanks, but I would like to recognize her, because without her leadership, this magic wouldn't be happening. And last but not least, before I get into my few words here, is she mentioned the softball game, the celebrity softball game that the Sentinels had, and for some reason they thought it was okay to have this old guy out there on the field, and I will tell you that I still have not recovered and not walking right, or can bend over and pick up a piece of paper whatsoever. Good morning and welcome to Cheshire County. My name is Chris Coates, and I'm the county administrator here in Cheshire County. And on behalf of the county commissioners and the delegation of state representatives for Cheshire County, I welcome you to Radically Rural. You know, though you sit in this beautiful theater, in this thriving and vibrant city, Cheshire County is a rural county that is challenged economically with many of the same issues that the rural counties are facing throughout the country. When confronting the strategically and how best to strategically address the concerns facing our rural communities, the leadership of Cheshire County chose many paths to aggressively pursue. One of them is to support the vision of Radically Rural and to become a lead sponsor of this wealth of knowledge, insight, energy, and vision event that could lead us in strengthening our communities in so many ways as we plan for the future and address today. This one kind of event that brings experts together and to discuss real solutions to today's and tomorrow's challenges, it is a true example of what is unique about this region. We are progressive, thoughtful, pragmatic in our approach, and always collaborative, always with the ego set aside and with the greater good in mind. I want to thank Hannah Grimes Center and the Keene Sentinel for all their time and energy in the vision of making Radical Rural a reality. The impact Radical Rural has been and continues to be felt throughout Cheshire County. And for those in attendance today, enjoy our communities, our restaurants, our breweries, our distilleries, our arts, entertainments, our bike trails, and our beautiful outdoor recreation opportunities. I ask only one favor: tell others about us, and please come back and visit and bring a friend. And I think if Luca Paris or anybody from the Greater Monadnock Collaborative Chamber is here, they'll like the next part. Remember, Cheshire County and the Monadnock region is always within thriving distance when you need it. Thank you.
Okay, for all of those of you standing in the back, come on down. You don't have to worry about interrupting. There's lots of seats up here, so come on down. I was also told to move a plant, so one moment. There we go. The work never stops. I was gonna say one more thing. What was it? That's not in my notes. Anyway, well, that was, oh, yeah. There we go. Y'all, it's too early. Okay. All right. So now I want to thank our track level sponsors. So we can give track level sponsors a round of applause. You'll hear from some of those at your sessions. And our summit level sponsors. Okay, I wanted to say a word about the Solution Slam tomorrow. While we might know in Cheshire County, I just remembered what I was supposed to say, Cheshire County virtual booth in the app, there's a video that kind of shows more about Cheshire County, so feel free to check that out. While we know what's working for us here in Cheshire County, and we enjoy sharing those things with you, it's equally important for us to hear from you about what's working in your neck of the woods. So if you're interested, sign up at registration out in the lobby. We'll select 10 to 15 folks to present. If you're selected, we'll contact you through the event app, or you can write down another way for us to contact you. Solutions to present could be ideas that you haven't yet begun to execute, or they could be existing efforts. Some examples from last year are a Touch a Trade event, a municipal calendar hosted by a local news organization, and a sober gathering space. Tomorrow morning at the plenary session before Mark Brackett's keynote, we'll bring the mic to you in your seat and you'll have 60 seconds to tell us about it. This is intended to be light, fun, joyous, and celebratory, but make sure to practice because we really do need to stick to 60 seconds. Oh, and there's a $500 prize and it's audience voted. So if you want $500 to go toward your solution, then then sign up out at registration. All right. One second. There we go. Abigail Rose Clark is an author, somatic educator, writer, and artist. She's the author of Returning Home to Our Bodies, Reimagining the Relationship Between Our Bodies and the World. Abigail grew up farming on a small family farm in western Massachusetts, and this close relationship with the land has formed the foundation of her work and writing. Welcome, Abigail.
Hi, thank you all so much, and thank you, Juliana, for inviting me to speak here. And thank you all for all that you do to protect and nourish our rural communities. This is a selection from a chapter in my book, Returning Home to Our Bodies, called In the Ecotone. In the woods behind the house where I grew up, a small brook glides down through a ravine and then squishes out muddily into a wetland. And is on the other side of a property line. And as a child, I had very clear instructions not to cross any of the barbed wire fences or old stone walls delineating our land from the neighbors. So I would sit at the edge, where the brook pours out into the wetland, where the light often glows particularly golden in the late summer, and where in winter the tracks of rabbits and mice stipple the snow. Down there in the woods, I'm only a few hundred yards away from the house. But this land down by the wetland is a different world. This muddy, marshy land at the edge of the woods is home in a way a house could never be, full of hidden pockets of magic. My childhood dog and I would pass long summer hours there, and while I mostly minded my mother's warnings not to come home covered in mud, my childhood dog never did. Now, as an adult, I've returned home to the woods that grew me. The brook and wetland are in many ways unchanged, even in a world where development has eaten away at the woods and wetlands of so many people's childhoods, and even though we now face droughts and heat waves that were unheard of when I was young. The word ecology comes from the Greek oikos, house. The study of ecology is the study of our natural home, the different biomes or climate groups that make up this planet. Biomes are the combination of communities of life that make up a particular space. Study of the biome includes studying all of the various individual pieces of the community to better understand the fullness of this place of our home. When you look out at the natural world that surrounds you, how many different types of plants do you see? How many animals, including birds and insects, can you see or hear? Is the land around you in flower, or is it a time of setting seed? Even in a city, the land lives in cycles. When you give your attention to the land around you, not just passively, but with your entire body, what do you see, hear, smell, and feel? To study this, to notice this, is to engage in a practice of deepening presence. It's good and necessary to notice the breath, to move as we can, and notice feelings and sensation within our own bodies. But it is incomplete. The whole of my body includes the whole of the place my body inhabits. To cultivate complete presence, it is necessary to notice the place we inhabit and to inhabit it fully. The woods where I played in as a child and now once again walk as an adult, where the brook tumbles down through secondary growth of conifers and hardwoods and the forest meets wetland, is called an ecotone. Ecotone comes from the word ecology and the Greek word tonos, meaning tension. The tension between two separate habitats, two separate homes, meaning it is neither one nor the other. It is different from both because it is a combination of both. Species in an ecotone typically interact in some way with both biomes. A frog, for example, lives in the river and on the land, and the tadpole needs the small, shallow water at the edge of the river, along the banks. Frogs, then, are creatures of the ecotone. They live in the tension and tone of land and water together. Humans are similarly creatures of the ecotone, particularly if we give ourselves the poetic license to use that word to describe not just the edges of habitats, but any space where a tension between two differences exists. The closest intimacy is a dance of the ecotone as we navigate the space and differences between ourselves and another. If we allow ourselves to consider our lives as inherently part of the poetry of the ecotone, then the rigid binaries necessary for supremacies to function cease to have such a stranglehold on our imaginations. The ecotone refutes the very concept of isolated binaries and holds a spectrum of possibility because it is neither this nor that. It is something else entirely. Consider with me the possibilities available to us if we embrace this tension of our differences and the ways the space and tension between us creates room for vibrancy. Conflict becomes an edge of discovery. Diversity is celebrated, not simply tolerated. And we are liberated from the rigid binaries that push us to despise or disregard what is different. Thank you all so much.
That was beautiful. I actually met Abigail at a book reading in Brattleboro at a little coffee shop. It was really sweet. As you know, this year we're exploring the theme of regenerating rural communities, which can be taken lots of different ways. Today and through our other plenary sessions, we're talking about doing that by reweaving our social fabric. It sounds a bit fluffy, but it's just about knowing that we need to remember how to reach toward each other and show up for each other in big and small ways in everyday life, not just when there's an emergency. Before I invite the panelists up here, let me provide a little more context. We don't want to oversimplify what's going on. As my friend Nicole Savita with EcoGather said when we were chatting about this, there are serious and embedded systemic drivers of social separation that need attention to broadly address our social unraveling. Among other things, people are so overscheduled, overworked, everything's been commodified, so we expect that we have to pay for care, for food, for rides, for everything, and it feels like a burden to need help. And I would also, of course, have to add, we're experiencing separation between humans and land and other living beings, which is also directly impacting this. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was at a rural education summit hosted by Partners for Rural Impact. Holly Fogel with the Monarch Foundation was talking about why she chose that name for the foundation. Monarch butterflies migrate 2,500 to 3,000 miles, but the butterflies who start the journeys aren't the ones who finish it. There are typically 4 to 5 generations of butterflies that make the journey. We may be the next leg of the journey, but we are neither the beginning nor the end. We may never see the culmination of our work, which is hard to think about sometimes, but it still matters to do it. It's going to take generations to address many of these larger systemic problems, and the tireless and innovative efforts represented here today are one leg of the journey that we're privileged to witness. With that said, I'm grateful to welcome Fred Riley with Weave, the Social Fabric Project, Fatuma Ahmad with Frontline Farming, Megan Helberg with the Anne Frank Center, and Elby Prevet, a community organizer who runs Merle's Bar, to the stage. While they come up here, let me tell you a little bit about Fred, and then he'll introduce the other panelists. Frederick Riley grew up in a tough neighborhood of Saginaw, Michigan, where he didn't have a lot, but he did have community. His mother taught him that when times were tough, you shared what you had, offered emotional support, and showered love abundantly on everyone. Riley spent 16 years at various levels of the YMCA organization around the country. He helped build and fund programs that gave youth a sense of value and belonging while helping them to prepare for life beyond high school. Now Riley leads Aspen Institute's Weave, which supports people in communities everywhere who are weaving trust, connection, and hope. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Juliana, thank you so much for the work and also the invitation. And thank you to the staff. I've been practicing saying radically rural. So it's a hard, I can't say them both at the same time. So good morning. Hold on, good, let's, wait, hold on. Good morning. Okay, I just want to remind you that good morning, good afternoon, good evening are all call and response. And so maybe throughout this time, we're going to do some calls and you all have to respond. Okay, are you all awake enough for that? Okay, perfect. I get to lead really cool work, a project called Weave, the Social Fabric Project. And I could go in and read some notes about the work that I do. But it's probably better for me to first start with some stories, and the stories of the panelists that I have with me who are actually reweaving the social fabric of the communities they come from. And so, Megan, I'll start with you. You live in Nebraska, and you wanted young people, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, to see the world, but also figure out how they can take the learnings from the world back home and be a superstar in their Nebraskan community. And so can you tell us a little bit about your work in reweaving the social fabric in Nebraska?
Sure. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Helberg. I'm from Taylor, Nebraska, population 150. And yeah, whoop, whoop. This is my first time in New Hampshire. I'm so happy to be here. It's beautiful, and everyone has been so welcoming. So I've been a teacher for 15 years. I am a teacher at the school where I went to school, kindergarten through 12th grade. And I realized that there were a lot of people in my community, both students and adults, who wanted to travel but were very intimidated by it. So instead of starting a student travel club, which is quite common throughout the country, maybe there's even student travel clubs here, I approached my administration and said, okay, just roll with me on this one. How about we do a community travel club where adults in the community can go too? They were a little hesitant, but we did it, and it has been fantastic. It's been absolutely fantastic for our community in a multitude of ways. Not only does it allow the youth and the adults to form these really strong bonds. Remember, we're 150 people, so we all know each other already, but we know each other in a certain way, right? We see the kids playing football on Friday night, or we see them in church, or we see them at the grocery store. So for them to have these shared experiences and get to know each other for the whole person that they are and see their layers and levels has been incredibly powerful for our community. And it also, travel works both ways, right? Those of you who love to travel, you get this. Not only do you get to see the world and how other people do things, you realize that there's not one right way to do something, and that's really important for us to realize. But it also then makes you appreciate your home. Many people in rural areas, sometimes this trend is changing, but many people think, oh gosh, what do we have to do here? I want to go to someplace fancy. I want to go to Boston, or I want to go to New York City. I want to go to someplace big and fancy. So for them to see these cities and how wonderful they are and diverse, and learn that there's different ways to do things and think, but then also it makes you look at your home place and realize, you know what, gosh dang, this is pretty nice. I have a little piece of paradise right here in the middle of Nebraska. And we like to say, the middle of nowhere, we don't say that anymore. We say the middle of everywhere. So we are proud to be from the middle of everywhere.
Megan, that's amazing. Maybe just a quick follow-up. So I believe that service or travel has the ability to transform the lives, but also be transformed yourself. And so I'm wondering, as you are taking the young people and the adults on these, out of Taylor, Nebraska experiences, how are they seeing the world differently? Because sometimes when you're in a box or you're in your own neighborhood, you might think that the other side of the community is different and they're bad because of what you've seen on the news and TV. So I'm wondering, are there experiences where you've seen some of the folks be changed because of what they've seen while on the road?
Absolutely. So when you live in a really small, not only are we rural, but we are incredibly remote. So I think there is kind of a difference there as well. We're 4 hours from the nearest airport, that's Omaha, and we are 2 hours away from the nearest Walmart or fast food restaurant. So we're rural and remote. And I love it. I choose to live there, right? No one has made me live there. That is where I want to live and where I want to call home. However, there's pros and cons to every place. One thing that I noticed as a teacher and just growing up there my whole life is that a lot of people think the exact same way. And so bringing awareness is what I saw myself doing as a teacher. As a teacher, I was pretty bold and a little bit outside of the box, But I always told my students, I just want to make you aware that there is another way to think. You don't have, then once you are aware of it and you have that knowledge, it's up to you of how you want to perceive it, what you want to do with it. But I want you to have increased awareness about our world. And the best way to do that, I feel, is through travel and to experience it with your 5 senses. So we have had some incredible transformations, we might say some radical transformations, and that has filtered down because we did the first travel club over 10 years ago, this trip. And so now these students are adults. Many of them have moved back to the community. Many of them are planning trips now with their own families because they want their families to have this experience of travel and awareness and this shift of mindset. I say just because we are rural does not mean we are any less eager to learn. We simply need the opportunities. And I kind of saw myself as that person that could bring the opportunities. So I kind of ask all of you here, are you that person in your community? What opportunities can you bring to your community?
Wow, wow. Thank you, Megan. Fatima, so amazing to be here with you today. You're reweaving your community by helping people navigate the community through community navigators and creating stronger community ties. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and how you are helping to reweave your community?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you.
That was a test. That was a test. That was a test.
Thank you for being here to listen to our stories today, and thank you for my colleagues who are community navigators themselves and leaders every day, like many of you. I've been really thinking a lot of this question and this theme of weaving over these past couple months as I thought of coming to this conference, and really want to introduce myself humbly as a farmer here today. And if my mother, as a child of immigrants from Ethiopia and Yemen, if my mother was here, she would quickly chime in, well, Fatima is a professor as well, and other accolades. And I wish that I didn't live in a world in which farming isn't seen as such weaving, such an expertise, something that takes years of knowledge. And when I think of the history of farming itself, often we think of it as something that's an extension of nature, but really it's an intervention into nature, right? And when we think of that historically, farmers, and as we shifted from foraging, allowed the space for others to have leisure time and for other arts and other forms to take place. And so, as someone who works in food, I see food as such an intersection of where so many things can happen, right? And many interventions can be made. And it's not only about the food we eat, but that food is what makes GDPs in the world, right? It's what enlivens us every day. And so when I look at farming here, farming is one of the widest professions. And for me to have become a farmer as it is wasn't an easy journey. And when I look at the statistics around farm workers, as it were, these are people who are 70 to 80% Black and brown people, people from the communities I come from, people that look like me. And the history of farming here in the United States is one that's saddled with pain, from bringing people enslaved from Africa to now shifting to bringing people from other countries that have no rights, and codifying that in laws, right? So ag workers under federal laws do not receive labor protections, agricultural workers and domestic workers. I found myself in an evolution in my life after 20 years of farming where I really want to build the next generation of farmers. And that's not easy, right? Learning that for people who haven't done it in a lot of ways. Farming is tireless work. It's not as sexy as people think when I'm on calls and they're like, oh, I wish I was there out on the farm like you. And I'm like, no, I really don't think you do, right? You might have done so if you did. So part of my path in making it as a farmer and starting an organization called Frontline Farming, which seeks uplifting Black and brown farmers and women, is I recognize that many of the ag workers across our state didn't have any protections as well. And with that in mind, we started a new organization that seeks to uplift ag workers. And as many of us know, in rural communities, we're invisibilized. There isn't a lot of investment that happens for us. And this is even more true for the Black and brown people who are often farming and make up huge rural communities and want to do that work. And so a part of the work of Project Protect Food Systems Workers and a community navigator group we created, which are called Promaturas, all Spanish speaking. We primarily have Mexican agricultural workers in Colorado, some Guatemalan, primarily Mexican, was that people say we're invisible, but guess what? We've been surviving and holding up systems for so long. And so we asked ourselves, who are those people that do that? Well, it's often our mothers, our aunts, our sisters who are taking us to appointments. And so we asked ourselves, well, how do we invest in those people? And so I'm really proud of the fact that now, 4 years in, minimal funding for immigrant rights groups, let alone ag worker groups, we have over 40 women who navigate across the state of Colorado, administering basic rights for people, taking them to doctor's appointments, and through Frontline Farming, partnering to bring about 10,000 pounds of food a week. As we know, in rural communities, and as farmers, we're isolated from good food. But farm workers, as Cesar Chavez said so long ago, the very people who grow food in the United States are the people who often go hungry. And so even meeting a need of feeding those communities who feed us is a privilege I found. And as a child of immigrants from Ethiopia and Yemen, my countries are in famine right now. And so I'm highly motivated and find it a privilege to be able to steward land and uplift others like me.
Fatima, I would probably have to agree with your mother that you are a farmer, but a professor and probably a whole lot more. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you, Fran.
Yeah. LB, my friend, we've traveled around the country together. You are from Wilkes, North Carolina. And
Wilkes, by God County.
Wilkes County, I'm sorry, I forgot. There's a, and somebody said woohoo, so I think there's some folks from Wilkes County back there. And you felt like you didn't have a place at home and that you were run out of your home. You coined yourself as a hillbilly, and you said you didn't feel like there was a space for a lesbian in your hometown, and you wanted to make sure that other young people did not feel like that they had to leave their hometown to be somebody. Tell us why you decided to weave your community in that way.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. I'm LB Prevet. I am from, as we say, Wilkes, by God County, North Carolina, and the foothills, the Appalachian Mountains, where I was born and raised. That's where my family lives. That's where we've been for centuries, down in the same area. So long that the census takers could not tell you how my name was spelled. You know, it just changes every 10 years when they come by. So yeah, I had grown up there, and it's the type of place, kind of like Megan was talking about, with rural communities that you're supposed to be ashamed to be from. It's a place that smart kids are supposed to leave and gay kids have to leave. And that's what you hear every day. And for me personally, when I was 17, I had a pretty violent attack. And I remember crawling my way out of the woods, and when I drove back home, I was staring in the mirror, and I just kept saying, what am I gonna do? And that's just the question I kept asking myself. I didn't have an answer for years to that. I still don't have an answer. I'm still asking that every day. But after spending some time trying to avoid home and living out west, I found my first answer of what I was going to do, and it was go home. And I didn't know what that meant, but I knew when I was living out west, I realized I may be like a lesbian hillbilly, but I'm like 51% hillbilly, 41% lesbian. Like I'm just, I was like, I'm just like too country for the queers in the city. And yeah. And what I learned when I was out there is that our big, powerful, connected queer organizations are not coming to save us. They're telling us, I don't know if you guys ever seen the Harvey Milk movie. Remember he was talking to the kid, and he's like, get on the bus and go as far as you can. Get to the biggest city, and the kid's like, but I'm in a wheelchair. We keep telling queer kids to leave rural communities, but we're born there every year. We keep being born there, and no one's coming to put their hands on us, their arms around us, and tell us that it's okay. So I moved home, and I just stayed there, and that was it. Like, I just wanted my presence to be enough, but it wasn't enough. And so I ran for county commissioner. Spoiler, I lost. We're very Republican, and I am gay, if you haven't picked up on it. And so that was when I first got connected with the Weave team. And that's when Weave told me I was a weaver. I've previously just referred to myself as an over-enthusiastic neighbor. And I met the Weave team and kind of began this work of like, well, what does it look like? And partnered with folks who are already doing amazing work within our community on how do we organize for our minority youth? How do we organize for our queer youth? And of course, COVID comes along and kind of hits the pause. But then I was so lucky to have two dear friends of mine, Mike and Aaron, come up to me and they said, we're thinking about opening a bar. Are you in? They loved cocktail culture from the area, and I love bartending. I've always done it, even when I have a full job. I just love to be around. And so three of us started Merle's, which is my bar there in hometown. We name it Merle's because Merle Fest, when I was 17, is where I pulled myself out of the woods. And 15 years later, that's my bar on Main Street that you can drive by and see. And I had this big hope, of course, that like it was going to be a haven, that it would be somewhere I could talk to my neighbors, love my neighbors, and they could see me, all of me. Not the parts they liked, but all of it. And we had a band this past spring. We've been open about 18 months. And we had a band this past spring. Laurel, a friend Clover Lynn brought her band in, and they're a queer bluegrass band. They're really awesome. And there was this younger woman came up to me at the bar. I mean, I'm not going to make any assumptions, but she was in a short sleeve button down, you know? And she starts talking to me about, you know, I was like, is this your first time here at Merle's? And she's like, yeah, I actually grew up here. And I was like, oh, did you? And she's like, yeah, I love this band. I followed them for a lot. I can't believe they're in Wilkes County. And she's like, I never thought I would get to see this because the band is full of queer women that play traditional music. And she's like, I never would have thought I could have saw this in Wilkes County. Like, this is just so cool. And I was like, oh, that's so great. And I gave her a beer and then walked inside and like cried for 10 minutes in the liquor closet of just like, that it did happen. That it did happen. And it's not just that she's saying it in a gay bar because, you know, it's a rural town. We couldn't support a gay bar just population-wise. She's saying it in front of the pride flag with the pastor and the deacons right there. She's saying it in the bar where that conservative county commissioner is also sitting here in conversation. Like, you're saying it in a place where you can say that, and it's not just that you feel safe saying it, it's that those folks hear it. That they're in a space where they feel safe enough to hear things they've never heard before because they've not had that connection.
Yeah. The only thing I'd add or push on your story is that you were doing this work long before Weave came along. And I just have to add that because we did not appoint you. You were already doing this. And I think that's such a cool thing about the work that we do at Weave. We get to work in communities or support people who've already appointed themselves as the person who's going to go forward and help to solve whatever issue. They're going to create safe spaces, and they're going to become a voice for the voiceless, and they're going to help people see the world differently. When I came to this work, I came because I read about the founding of the work. We were founded by New York Times author David Brooks. If you read the New York Times, he might be important to you. But one of his first acts as the leader of Weave is he traveled around the country. He went to small towns, we went to Wilkes, we went to big cities, and a lot of places to hear the stories of people who were just showing up. And he heard the stories of my childhood pastor, Reverend Austin, who was the first person to tell me I could be somebody important, that I could move beyond this narrative that I hadn't met my dad until I was 12. We grew up on welfare, and that I could be somebody. He heard the stories of my elementary school fifth grade teacher who went to teach the sixth grade because she wanted to be with me for another year because I was that important. But she thought that I could be somebody really important one day. So she paid the fees and took me to take the tests so that I could go to a school for the gifted and talented in the middle and high school. He heard the stories of the people who helped to weave my life together. I wouldn't be here if it had not been for those people who saw a need like you all did and decided to step in and be the person to stand up and help to solve it. And so I'm here standing on the shoulders of some giants, and my way of paying it forward is to work with folks like these really amazing people. I am sitting here in awe because of the stories that you told and who you are, and hope that one day I can be just like you. I'm serious about that. We're supporting a paradigm shift. We live in a world, we live in a country where we see leaders as people who wear, Navy suits with pinstripes, and they walk through the halls of Congress, and they sit in buildings with large windows from ceiling to floor, and they make decisions for things that happen not only in rural communities, but also in big cities and small towns all around our country. And we support people who live in those communities who say, we have some issues here, and I'm the person to help to work to solve it. And so I'm really proud to say that I support people who are building and connecting communities and working on some big systemic issues in the neighborhoods they hail from. If our country is going to move forward in a positive trajectory, it is going to be up to these three, but the other tens of hundreds of thousands of people just like them who need to be inspired or who are also doing that work in communities. So I'm a proud leader of Weave, the Social Fabric Project. I'd like to thank you. I think one of the first questions I like to pivot to, and it wasn't in the script, right? So don't be upset at me. But why you, right? I think that there are a lot of people who are sitting on the sidelines right now who are seeing issues, who are reading the paper, who feels like the air feels different in the world, right? And they want to do something about it, but don't know why, right, or how. And so I'm wondering why you and how you got started. Anybody can just dive in.
Yeah, I mean, I think for mine, what I looked around, it was like, well, who else? I'm a Prevette. We have broad shoulders. Someone's got to haul it, and I felt comfortable when I came home. I just knew what it was going to mean to bear the weight of that unloving long enough so that they could learn to love me. And it was why me, because I didn't want anyone else to do it. I don't want anyone else to have to do that. I want to do it so that we never do it again.
So I think for me, LB was touching on it earlier, is that, the most meaningful work comes from within your own community. We did not need someone on a white horse, riding in to save us in Loup County, Nebraska. We can do it ourselves, but we have to be reminded of that sometimes. And so my mother was a great community supporter, leader in the 4-H. We're picking up trash on the side of the road all the time. It's little things. It doesn't have to be something profound and like this grand gesture that you do to get started. But I would encourage you to, and all of you here know or preach into the choir, is that start it from within your own community. Why me? Is because I live there. And if this was going to be my home, gosh darn, I want it to be awesome. I want it to be a place that I'm proud of to call home. I want it to be a place where I can talk about my hometown with pride. And it's not the butt of jokes, like those days are over. I want to talk about my town in a positive way. And so that has to come from the people who live in it. And we have to be reminded sometimes of the goodness and richness of our own homes and our own communities.
Yeah, I love that answer. So much of the approach we try to bring to life and in our work, especially as BIPOC people, is asset-based ways of being, right? And so many people talk about our communities, places I'm from, the countries I'm from, in ways that are about our deficits. When we think about food, we're often seeing us as the recipients of food aid, but we don't talk about how we're the very labor that makes so much of the food, that it's actually so many stories from Black communities that actually make the foundations of what we consider to be American food. When we think of who is cooking in kitchens, I always think of the story of Martha Washington's cookbook, right? She wasn't cooking in her kitchen, but she did have an amazing chef named Hercules. And his story is still being found now, right? And so much of our assets are also erased every day. When I think of the way that streets are named, or even railroad lines, right? The Chinese contributed so much to that, and yet we see nothing named after them. And I see it in my life every day happen. I see it in my own written work, in my own advocacy, how people will very easily erase me from the story and narrative, and what it takes to have to fight to still maintain the very things I created and have. I feel really privileged to have had access to education. And so much of what I'm fueled by is that privilege, even though so many times people will see me in a deficit-based way. When I think of sort of going to a rural conference, I went to this huge women's farming conference, and I introduced myself proudly and all the things we're doing in community, and a farmer woman across the table said to me, "Oh, wow, well, you know, I just really want to ask Fatima here, what is it like to live in a food desert?" And as hurtful as it was also an opportunity to educate. We're shifting away from language that says food desert, right? It doesn't feel good when people come to my farm and say, "Oh my God, I came to tour this food desert." And that's not, you know, when you call things like something like a food desert, it implies it's a natural phenomena. But what we see is that this is happening across the US. It doesn't matter if you're in Denver, in a rural space, but to the same communities who experience it. And so, yeah, I think that I'm proud to be able to walk in rooms and say I'm a farmer, and also have the opportunity to have expansiveness in my heart to educate and meet people across those bridges as well.
Wow. I think one of the things I'm thinking about now is, like, as I sit here with these three powerful women, it's like how like tough it could be to be the person to stand up, right? And how tough it can be, because you're all three are leading like system level change, right, in a local community. And so I'm wondering, like, what fears or hesitations did you have as you started to tackle this? And what did the people say? Like, were they upset? They say, "Get out of here, you aren't going to do anything with this"? Like, I'm wondering, like, how did people receive this?
So in Taylor, Nebraska, where I've born and raised, I literally know every single person, and every single person literally knows me, which is amazing. But when you're trying to do something different, that's really scary, because you're afraid that you might be then shunned from the community of all these people that have watched you grow up and know your family. And so when you think a little bit differently than everybody else in the community, and you're really kind of pushing the envelope and pushing that, I had some fear, definitely. My passion is, in my area of expertise, is Holocaust and genocide education. And there was none of that occurring in my community when I first started teaching there. And that bothered me. And then I was surprised at how much that bothered me. And I said, okay, well then if someone's gonna do something about it, it's gotta be me. But in order to do that, I need to educate myself and find ways to do that. And that's what has led me all over the world as far as travel. But then I came back with some different ideas. And so I was very fearful of the people that I had grown up with. I'm not a farmer, but I am a rancher. I live on a ranch. I live on a cattle ranch, and that's what my family does. My dad's still a cattle rancher at 88 years old. And it's very much a sense of community, and you help neighbors with chores and vice versa and things of that nature. But I think what helped the most was that these people trusted me. I never have received a single complaint in 15 years as a teacher, even though I am pushing the envelope and maybe making their children aware of some issues, some hot button issues that we can talk about. No one's ever complained, because they trust me, they know me, they may disagree with me, but they trust me. And so I think we can't overlook the steps that it takes to build trust within the community. There are new people. I mean, it's not just the same 150 people, although it kind of is, but you know, there's new families moving in every now and then, and it's not just a, hey, welcome, but it's a repeated, hey, welcome. Will you come to this? Will you please come to that? Let's get to know each other repeatedly. So I always say in Taylor, we can't be too picky and choosy about the people who are moving in. So we can't give them a lot of side eye and eye rolls because we need them. Like, we literally need every person. They are needed and valued and wanted to sustain our community, not just from surviving. Like, we don't just want to exist, but we want to thrive. And so If we are giving those people side eye and eye rolls and think that they're not a part of this community because they haven't lived here for generations, well, guess what? They're probably going to treat you pretty crappy in return. But if you welcome them with open arms, they're probably going to treat you that way back. So building up that trust relationship took a lot of the fear out of it for me at the beginning.
Well, when I think of this question, I often think about, so many difficult conversations, and particularly for people that might belong into dominant groups, might experience discomfort. But I think for people who come from the Black community, from immigrant communities, from other communities that are vulnerable because systems institutionalize these forms of oppression, it can mean death. And so I've genuinely had the fear of being killed. Making moves in agriculture and having white farmers and ranchers come after me when I fight to represent ag workers is not a very easy thing. And certainly for us, we need those bridges. Those people employ our ag workers. We're not trying to be adversarial, but we do believe that fundamental human rights are something important, not something we should just talk about in values, or how often I've been told, well, Fatima, you might need to slow down to go faster, right? When all I'm asking for is parity, not something greater. And so I think of the words of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King in his last speech on the mountaintop. He talked about how even longevity has its place. And listening to that speech helped me a lot in times that we're trying to be braver. And I think it's important for us to know, because when I was younger, I really thought the world was benevolent and it was about understanding. I think that as a data activist, if I could just present enough information, right? Whenever I'm somewhere, my identity precedes me. Nobody allows me the space of not being subjective in that way. And so people often don't hear it. But I often thought that if we could present enough information, then people could understand and hear others' experiences. But I find that to not be necessarily true. And so the cost of changing something is not easy, and you have to be prepared for the tensions that will arise in that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I had first when I made the decision to come back home, it's just that was less scary to me, I think, than the fear that had been eating me alive up until that point. Like, I was so afraid of everything, everywhere, and all the time, and I was like, Jesus, it can't be worse. Like, going home can't be worse than carrying this, and like, what's gonna happen? Like, how much worse could it be, And it's kind of the balance of, am I afraid to go home and be authentic, or am I afraid to die as half myself? Like, if I'd never went back home, if I'd never went back to Wilkes, I was never gonna be my whole self. I was never gonna get to be authentic and love my whole self, like every aspect of it. Because, I moved out west and they want to put you in speech therapy to lose your accent. You go back home and you got to dress a little different. And so it was this no. I chose to no longer be afraid of myself when I moved back home and the potential that I could contain if I would just do it.
I want to make sure we can get one really important question in, but I'll make it a twofer that I'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to answer. Right now we're talking about reweaving connections of people, but as we sit here in New Hampshire and you all talk about, cattle ranches and farms, I'm wondering, how do we, what are some of the things people can do to go reweave community together, some tips and tricks, but also this idea of connecting people with land and community, right? Fatima, you pushed this point earlier today, something I never thought about. I live in an ivory tower and work in an ivory tower in DC, and I never thought about it in this way, so thank you. But I'm wondering, how do we get people back connected to each other, but also land as well? And why is that important?
Sure, I'll start with the land. I'll answer that part. So often when I'm farming and with this extreme climate chaos, sometimes I just look outside and I'm reminded that the way that the plants are feeling is how I'm feeling. When the sunflowers are drooped over and the squash plants, and I'm like, I should close my stomates up too and maybe, conserve some energy, right? So the land can teach me so much. And My teacher, farming, had always taught me, take care of your corners and edges, and the middle will take care of itself. And when I take concepts like that and think of it socially, imagine if we lived in a world where we were taking care of the corners and edges. Imagine if we measured health of a community by how those margins were doing. And so land can teach us a lot, but I also think that it's been interesting how in this movement towards regenerative agriculture, where we're so focused on the science of land, carbon sequestration, soil, things like that, many regenerative farmers aren't talking about the humans that toil on the land. And so as I worked really hard for a farm worker bill in Colorado, we were really surprised that many regenerative farmers came out against us. And one thing one regenerative farmer said to us, to our face, was, well, Fatma, if this bill passes, then I'll just get a tractor because it won't complain. And so the focus on just biofuels and that kind of conservation and regenerative ag without thinking of the very humans that make up that labor of stewardship has been puzzling and disturbing as well. So I want to encourage us to expand our minds and think about who really is doing the work of food systems work.
So where I live in central Nebraska, it's called the Sand Hills. Maybe some of you have heard of it. The soil is literally sand, beautiful sand, like that's on a white sandy beach, and then it's covered with vegetation that is great for cattle. But because of the sandy soil, you have to be incredibly careful and such a great steward of the land, because if you overgraze it, you're going to end up with a beach and just sand blowing all over. We call them blowouts. And so we are really dedicated to, and we've grown up with this in my area. We don't have huge factory farms or ranches in our area. It's the family ranch that's still very dominant in our area, and we want to keep it that way. As you were saying, the ranchers that I know are the kindest to their animals. They are the kindest to their land, and they pass that down to their children and grandchildren in our area. And I just have to make a local connection here, and an English teacher nerd, okay, as well, is Willa Cather, Nebraska's most famous author. She had this wonderful quote. Why I bring her up is she's buried in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, which I think is just 30 minutes away next to her partner, Edith Lewis. She wrote My Antonia, O Pioneers, all these wonderful books set in the Sandhills of Nebraska. And she has this wonderful quote, when people start bickering about, well, that's my land, or this is mine, and that's not yours, and all this, and we see this happening all over the country and all over the world of who does the land belong to? She says, the land belongs to the earth. It belongs to none of us. We are only considered very lucky if we get to take care of it for a little while. So if you do get the chance to take care of it for a little while, be a good steward of the land. So I always carry that Willa Cather quote with me, and I wish that others could embody that spirit as well, that if we get just a little luck to take care of the land for just a little while, let's make sure we do a darn good job.
Yeah, I think the way I think about land, because I'm not a farmer, I grew up on a family farm, so I don't do it anymore. I'm in recovery, It was a chicken farm. You'll never see me eat an egg again. But when I think about land and what it means to me in our physical landscape and like how I feel when I'm driving through Appalachia, for me, I feel like if you cut me open, I would look like my mountains. Like my spine would be that mountains. My veins would be muddy water. If you threw my heart on Main Street, it would look like Merle's. Like this land it's such a part of me, and both the parts of it that are natural and the parts of it that are so familial and home and nostalgic, to drive down that Main Street, to see this place that I've watched evolve even over my short lifetime. And I think for me, one of the biggest pivots I've seen in my community is that switch from a shame to pride of this place, where it went from the joke of like, oh, you're from Wilkes-Barre County, to like, I'm from Wilkes-Barre County. Like, we took the same jokes we've made about ourselves and we say them with pride of coming back to like, this is my land, this is my home, this is a place where I can come experience nature and all the good things about a rural community proudly.
Our time is drawing near, but I wanted to make sure Michael, my comms director, won't yell at me afterwards because I didn't get to this. I was feeling emotional when I was talking about Reverend Austin, but we do this work at Weave because trust in our country is at an all-time low. That thing that you feel when you're outside that something's going on with our country, it is people don't trust each other like we used to before, and trust is really the thing that gets things done in our communities, and these three powerhouses are helping to build trust in the communities they hail from. We care so much about trust that 4 years ago we launched Weaver Awards, which is a micro-grant program to fund people like these three and the work that they're doing in communities. We launched a speakers bureau to amplify their voices, and now we are placing Weavers, 3 or 4 of them, on 3 or 4 big stages every month. We launched a learning center and a connection hub online to make sure that we can connect them together so that they can share resources and tools. A couple of months ago, we launched trustmap.org, where you can go online and you can figure out the trust scores in your community, and also some pretty actionable steps that you can do in your community to get to work. You know, we believe that the issues that we have right now in our communities around the country are human created. And so it's going to take some real humans to get to work and solve them. So I hope you were inspired over these 45 minutes. I hope you have a rally call during these 45 minutes. And I hope if you aren't already, if you aren't working on something in your neighborhood, that you get active and you become the person that everybody is going to come to now to solve and come together and support the work that on the ground in the community you hail from. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you to Megan, Fatima, and LB. Thank you for your insights, and thank you for the amazing work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of you. I know that so many of the topics that were discussed are personal and relevant to all of us. And so I'd like to welcome Guy Davis one more time to the stage.
Thank you kindly. I like that, radically rural. This is called taking just a little bit of time. What you got to do sometimes, like what you're doing here, you take time to come together and figure things out. Because that big world sometimes gets so big that they can't figure themselves out. So. And you can help me sing. All you got to remember are the words, taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I like to spend time in the country. City ain't for me. Put down my phone, go out alone, and I let my spirit be. I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. That's the part you sing. I like to go by the river, sit on the banks all day. With a pole and a line, nothing on my mind. I can hear what the catfish say. Here's what they say. They say I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. Let me hear you. Taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I like to take my shoes off, go barefoot on the ground. I take a gander at little salamander and I watch him getting around. I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. Oh yes, I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I like to play my banjo and walk the railroad track. I walk all day for miles and miles. I don't care when I get back. I'ma take just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I keep whiskey in my pocket. Sometimes I make it gin. Sometimes I tote a keg of beer. It depends what mood I'm in. Get me? I'ma take just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I'ma take just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. In the city, folks are in a hurry. I gotta get out their way. In the country, I go wandering. I won't see a soul all day. I'ma take just a little bit of, take just a little bit of time. I'ma take just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. I'm taking just a little bit of, taking just a little bit of time. Well, I'm taking just a little bit of time, baby. Taking just a little bit of time. Oh, thank you. Here's a piece that I recorded on my Legend of a Sugar Belly CD. And this is sort of your relaxing, maybe going out and coming in music here, called Little David, Play on Your Harp. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. God should know the rainbow sign. Ain't no water but fire next time. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. Try it with me. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. Well, David killed Goliath dead. At least that's what the Hebrews said. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah, little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. Well, Paul and Silas locked in jail, couldn't get no one to go their bail. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah, little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, one more time. Little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah, hallelujah, little David, play on your harp. Hallelujah. Thank you all so very much. Have a good session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Guy. We hope that no one leaves here during Radically Rural without being changed in some way, whether it's thinking about an issue in a new and different way, getting ideas about how to reach toward your neighbors, or learning about a sector that's not your own, which ultimately helps you do your work better. We all have something to give and something to learn so we can continue to cultivate pragmatic, bold, and innovative solutions to social, political, and environmental problems. So let's get to it. Have a great day, everyone.